Welcome to the 14th episode of Scotia Insights. Today you're attending the 4th chapter in the web version of the series. Launched in February 2016, Scotia Insights is meant to bring a sense of deep understanding and awareness. Featured guest speakers share their expertise, and the audience is then encouraged to ask questions and engage in insightful discussions. So as you, our corporate customers, join us to learn more about our work to protect our customers' data and how cybersecurity can help strengthen your enterprise, we hope that you will be inspired to consider and make significant adjustments to the way you think about digital banking and evolving the way you do business. So it's my pleasure to join you for today's thought-provoking discussion. So let me introduce to you our panelists. Joining us from the Scotiabank Information Security and Control Team in Toronto, we have Rob Knoblauch, Vice President, Global Security Services and Deputy CISO of Scotiabank. Rob is a cybersecurity professional with over 20 years of experience protecting financial institutions from a myriad of information security risks. He serves on a variety of customer advisory boards for leading cybersecurity companies and speaks at various conferences on cybersecurity, AI, and machine learning. Rob has a passion for building strong teams and bringing new innovative technologies to combat the growing complexities of cyber threats. Prior to Scotiabank, Rob has worked in the Toronto Stock Exchange, Bank of Montreal, and Bird on a Wire. Also joining us from Rob's team, we have Steve Thompson, Director of Cybersecurity Awareness, Training and Communications. Steve is Scotiabank's Director of Cybersecurity Awareness, Training and Communications, and has been with the bank for the last 3 years. Prior to joining Scotiabank, Steve spent the last 10 years supporting public relations for some of Canada's most recognized brands, including Bell, Shoppers Drug Mart, and Interact. In his current role, he is tasked with building a cybersecurity risk culture across Scotiabank's global footprint. And right here in TNT, we've got Damian Jones. He's the General Manager, Corporate and Commercial Banking, and he completes today's panel. Damian has 11 years of experience in corporate and commercial banking. He has a wealth of experience in credit adjudication, portfolio management, business development, prospecting, deals structuring, and negotiation. He's responsible for the overall success of the commercial business line for Caribbean South, Trinidad, and Guyana, and will bring a strong focus on deepening client relationships by working across business lines, including retail and capital markets. Damian holds a BSc in Management Studies with a minor in Finance from the University of the West Indies and a Master's of Business Administration, an MBA from Andrews University. And so without further ado, I'll now hand you over to Steve to kick things off. Steve?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to be here. It's great to have the discussion with you. Rob and I put together what I think is a very solid presentation on cybersecurity threats, stuff that we've seen during COVID at Scotiabank, our Security Operations Center. We've also sort of painted a picture of what the threat network looks like right now, who these people are that are attacking us, or not just us in general, but the industry. And we're going to take some time to talk to you about how you can protect your businesses a little bit better. So let's get started. If we can move to the next slide. So the evolution of cyber attacks, this chart on the right, each one of these individual bubbles represents a data breach that occurred across different industries, and the size of the bubble represents the size of data that was lost. Now you can see it was pretty sparse back in 2009, but the size, the frequency and complexity of these attacks has grown exponentially. We don't even have 2020 data in here because it's tough to fit it all in. When you look back at 2009, the largest breach that ever occurred was 30 million customer records. Marriott Hotels back in 2018 was 383, and I believe we've crossed the billion data threshold. These are huge numbers, and it is growing at an exponential rate. If you can move to the next slide. The ongoing cost of a breach. A lot of people understand when you see in the news, hey, you know, this breach cost this company X amount of dollars, but that continues to escalate over time. We take a look at some of the major breaches that happened here on this line. You know, originally, for instance, Home Depot was valued at $62 million. It was going to cost the company, but when you factored in all the direct and indirect costs, those costs actually balloon for the businesses. And what you need to really consider when a breach occurs, you need to consider the costs for technical investigations. How much is it going to cost to figure out what exactly went wrong? You need to do customer breach notifications. You need to do protection for your customers after they've been breached, regulatory compliance issues, attorney fees and litigation, public relations, premium increases on your insurance, the amount of loss you had for fraud, and then indirect costs like cybersecurity improvements. What are you going to do to improve your systems and harden them to ensure they're not attacked again? How much is it going to cost to raise your debt to be able to pay off these fees? And loss of intellectual property, impacted distribution. Did you lose any contracts or revenue during that time? And devaluation of your trade name. So the impact of a data breach can be substantial for organizations. Next slide. So who exactly are we dealing with? Well, typically it's these 5 characters. So 50% of the attacks that we see are organized crime. They're really driven by profit. They're looking for money, social insurance number, credit cards, etc. Or the 28% is insiders. So these are disgruntled employees. You know, maybe they didn't get the promotion they wanted. Maybe they can take your data and sell it outside your business for more on the black market. State-sponsored, we figure, is about 12% of the attacks. These ones are motivated by political, economic, but really they're after a lot of intellectual property. These guys are really dangerous because they have deep coffers. The toolkits that they have are sponsored by governments. There's a lot of investment that goes into the technology and what these guys can do. Hacktivists is a term between a hacker and an activist. They're really looking to cause damage to organizations they dislike. Oil companies are big targets for this. Same with financial institutions. They're really just trying to gain awareness for their issues. Typically, the toolkits they have aren't as technical. The disruption they can create isn't that much. And then there's the opportunists. We call these the script kiddies. They're really amateur criminals. They just want to make a name for themselves. They typically will do some phishing, some DDoS attacks, but the impact is usually pretty low. Okay, next slide. And why is this happening? Well, there's a few reasons. Cybercrime is extremely profitable. So we can take a look. This was annual revenue due to crime in 2018 was $1.5 trillion, which is about the same size as Russia's GDP. And part of the reason why this is growing, as you'll see in the later slide, is it's very difficult to apprehend some of these people, especially the state sponsor, because they're sponsored by countries that don't have extradition treaties. So it's very difficult. We can pinpoint exactly who they are, where they are, but there really seems to be no repercussions from their governments. And in fact, their governments actually encourage this type of behavior. Okay, next slide. So Rob, do you want to take over?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Perfect. Awesome. So as Stephen Thompson has been saying earlier, the number of attacks has been growing daily. New viruses created every 5 seconds. We see a lot of news of ransomware in the media, especially now related to the financial industry. We also see one second, they decided to test my fire alarm today at the same time I have to do this meeting. So I apologize that you're going to hear beeps every once in a while, I guess. 10% of cyber crimes are only reported. We actually see that growing. This number and law enforcement are getting more actively engaged in international cybercrime and cybercrime, I guess, investigations. We've seen a number of cases, especially in the United States, where we've seen arrests in Czechoslovakia, Russia. Russia, they don't extradite, but at least in Czechoslovakia and some of the other European countries and some of the non-Chinese countries, we definitely are seeing a lot more collaboration between law enforcement. The average cost of a data breach will exceed 150 million. And this is a very big number for large organizations. Obviously, the data breach itself requires things not just of the ransomware restoring the systems, but also PR. We're also looking at legal costs and legal issues, credit monitoring for customers, enhanced security measures, and internal controls. We estimate 6 trillion in damages by 2021 through loss of service. One great example would be the ransomware attacks that affected Maersk, as well as the National Health Service in London, England, where entire hospitals were down and people who, were going into the hospital to get surgery suddenly had to be turned away. So we also have a recent article, actually just of last week, where a hospital in the United States, the surgery's computers crashed during a ransomware attack and someone has lost their life. So I guess that's one example where viruses are actually now physically harming people. Next slide. Scotiabank has committed $1.3 billion across 3 years to become digital leaders in the financial industry. And it does show we have been able to achieve some really high ranking awards in the recent year, well, this year to be quite fair, especially around our retail banking and our innovation around digital banking. That 1.3 billion IT investment is commensurate with security spend as well. So as we become more online, as we become more innovative, our role within cybersecurity is to ensure that the products and solutions that we offer are secure and free of risk. Next page. We have 5 digital factories in Canada, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and Colombia. And these factories serve as incubators for new products, services, and solutions for our 23 million customers around the world. They have a strong DevOps team, and we integrate with that DevOps team. So security people are implanted amongst every line of business and IT department across Scotiabank. We have over 1,000 top technical professionals from across the globe. We're employing over 700 security professionals, the largest security team among Canada's top 5 banks.
Rob, you're on mute still.
Sorry about that. I'm just trying to save you from those alarms. We do try to take a conservative approach to being defensive against fraudsters. We have multiple security layers in place with redundancy and detection and monitoring. We believe that we have a framework that has served us well, that's based on identifying your IT assets, your employees, protecting them using a myriad of internal controls, detecting the effectiveness of those controls, detecting compromise, respond, and recover. And you'll hear that theme throughout this presentation. While no company or country is immune to cyber attacks, we invest significantly in the expertise and technology to ensure the highest levels of protection. And this is developing partnerships with relevant industry working groups and government forums, and increasing our protective and detective measures. So what I mean by partnerships with industry forums and government forums, within each of the major countries that we operate in, we are closely aligned with our peer banking system, either through government advocacy or industry institutions. I'll give you one example. In Canada, we have a Canadian Banking Association. This Canadian Banking Association has the major banks as part of this association. Our security and threat intelligence people and our incident responders get together on a monthly basis to talk shop. Basically, what kind of attacks are you seeing in your backyard, and can we ensure that those attacks don't transpire into ours? We also share incident information. So in case one of us gets a really nasty type of attack and we want to share that information, we have the freedom to do so, and we actively do so. I am very close with my counterparts in the other banks. This Canadian example also exists with our other regions, such as Mexico, Peru, Chile, Colombia, UK, Hong Kong, Asia, in terms of Singapore, as well as the United States. Next page. COVID-19. So 2020 has been a very interesting year. And what we've actually seen is a shift away from your traditional financial services types of attacks. I'm sure pretty much everyone on this phone line has either received an email saying your banking information is suspect, please click on this link and give us your banking information, or received a phone call. In Canada, we have popular ones such as WestJet has offered us a free vacation if we give up our credit card details. We also have a very popular scam that comes from the government. Well, it doesn't come from the government. It's hackers pretending to be our revenue agency and asking for your credit card information to pay back taxes or you'll go to jail. Some of these sound a little bit more far-fetched than others, but a lot of people do fall for them. And recently there was an arrest of 12 people within India who were operating this scheme against Canadian citizens. But in terms of what we're seeing in 2020, what we believe is we're going to see a large increase, and we are seeing the increases of COVID-19 related threats. So people asking for your medical information, people asking for credit cards again, false information being spread, people asking you to click on a website so they can look at your computer when you're on that website and try to install malware. Next page. Business email compromise scams is something that is very, very pervasive across the industry. And what it basically is fraudsters just pretending to be someone else, sending emails to you to try to get you to to change your beneficiary banking information or make a payment. We definitely see a large increase and uptick of this, especially with our commercial clients. And it's really around due diligence. So we see things like, for instance, J. Smith at Vendor Inc. versus J. Smith at Vendor lowercase I Inc. We also see kind of plays on different types of words. We also see hackers breaking into the supply chain. So breaking into your supplier's email system and then sending emails from that system, asking you to do various wire instructions. There is some great things you can do to prevent the risk of this, such as never operate on email instructions alone, make a phone call, verify the legitimacy of that email. Often you'll see these types of scams right before a large payment needs to be made. And beneficiary banking information is something that we definitely are seeing a large rise on. Next page. Employees who handle wire transfers are often targeted, and there's multiple ways to target an employee. So just to give you the insight of what a hacker would do, the most and easiest tool to use would be LinkedIn. So just searching up a company name, payment operator, you'll be able to find a whole bunch of information about people who work within the company and what roles that they have. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. Also, what we see is people using breaches. So for instance, if you use the same username and password on Facebook or whatever website that you frequent, and that website becomes breached, just take that information and replay that information against other websites. So please do not use the same password for every website that you use, because it definitely plays a big role into hackers trying to target employees. Next page. Malware. Malware has always been around since 1998, and the first instance of that was the Morris worm. It has evolved over time. So what it used to be destructive malware in nature has now become more monetized malware. So it isn't just enough to kind of break the systems of a computer or of a company. Now what the hackers try to do is try to make money off of this situation. And there's two ways to do that. The first is through encrypting your computer and asking for a ransom, such as a Bitcoin, which is anonymously traced. The other more popular method, which we're seeing a huge rise of in 2020, especially with classes such as the Mesa ransomware, is hackers using this ransomware to extort data from your company and threaten to post that data. Otherwise, a payment would need to be made. Law firms in particular are very targeted by this because of the sensitive information that they hold, as well as manufacturing and industrial systems. Industrial systems, not so much from an intellectual property perspective, it's more about destruction, but definitely manufacturing in products where IP is very important. We're seeing a lot of attacks between state actors and governments, between North America and South America and Europe and the Asias right now, related to intellectual property for corona-related vaccines. So one example is the WannaCry and Petya ransomware attack. And just to show you the global nature of this type of situation, hackers broke into the NSA, which is the US National Security Agency, and stole tools called the blue set of tools. These blue set of tools were zero-day exploits against Windows computers. So basically, think of a program that can circumvent the controls of your Windows computer and allow a hacker to break in at a high level. These hackers stole that and realized, hey, we can make this into a virus and weaponize it. And they did just that. And we believe these hackers were out of the Ukraine. Over 300,000 Windows computers in 150 countries were affected. The dollar loss amount was in the high billions. So just FedEx alone, and this is through our discussions with the FedEx CISO, it cost them $300 million in cleanup and operational costs. Next page. Ransomware as a service. So it is now a business and monetized service. There is a company called the Evil Corporation Inc., and I'm not making that up at all. If other funny names are the Russian state-sponsored actors are called Fancy Bear. We have the Lazarus Group out of North Korea, and we have APT24 out of China. But the Revelware is more of a private fraudster type of ring, where basically they have developers that develop ransomware and have affiliates that help them break into the companies and deliver that ransomware. And then they have the victims who are impacted by that ransomware, and everyone makes a good amount of money. So that's why we're seeing ransomware attacks growing by 41% year over year. And we believe it's going to be here to stay for at least the next 5 years. Next page. Supply chain infiltration. Banks are really hard to break into, actually. We spend a lot of money on security, and we want to make sure that we have a practical level of security and control. And it is not easy to break into a bank due to our multiple layers of control, where to actually take money out is quite difficult. So what hackers are doing is going to the supply chain, and your third-party risk management programs are extremely important. Understanding the vendors that you interact with, what their security controls are. And when you're doing, and if you are doing cyber breach simulations or exercises, including your vendor into that to make sure you have an end-to-end control. Next page. Distributed denial of service attacks are something that we've been dealing with since roughly 2002. How it works is there's a lot of computers connected to the internet. In fact, there's discussions, I think, in 2018 where there's more devices online connected to the internet than there are human beings in the world. And actually, if you think about it, how many devices are connected to the internet associated with you right now, such as your phone, the computer that you're looking at this presentation through, and maybe you have other devices like your Google or Alexa. So hackers basically have implanted malware and have the ability to remotely command and control servers, and this botnet army sends basically bad traffic to a victim server designed to take it down. We do see DDoS attacks growing in size over time. So basically what they're saying is they're more ferocious and they're more damaging. Next page. Staying protected. So the first and most important thing you can do is identify and protect your assets. Understanding the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your assets. And if that sounds like a very onerous, boil the ocean type of approach, focus on your core systems. What are the critical information assets that you have in your organization that your operations depends upon? Making sure that you secure those things first, and then moving outwards, such as the workstations of employees. Who are your critical employees? Who are your system administrators? Do they have the right monitoring in place, the right controls and detection, so we can see if anything bad is happening with those people? Next page. Frameworks, creating a cybersecurity framework. Again, we recommend NIST out of the US government. It is pretty much industry adopted, which again talks about identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And these frameworks have sub-controls within each of these pillars that will help you design your security organization. Create policies such as code of conducts, internet access policies, network security policies, application policies, procurement policies, and make sure that our employees understand those policies so you have a legal fundamental framework and foundation to build your security program on. Know your regulators. We have over 72 different countries we operate in with over 224 legal entities. And I deal on an annual basis with roughly 50 regulators all over the world. So know who they are, work with them, do not be adversarial to them. These are your partners. These are people who can give you information on trends that's happening in your market. Also, having a transparent relationship with your regulator builds trust. Develop playbooks. I'm not a defeatist where I say eventually you're going to get hacked, but you should plan for the worst. And planning for the worst is conducting cybersecurity simulations. Say someone got breached, or data was taken out, or your network was not taken offline. What were the steps that you would do? Who you would engage? Do you have cybersecurity insurance? All these types of considerations, it's much better to figure out when you're not in a crisis. And lastly, build a strong user awareness program. Ensure that security is driven from the top down. All employees are aware of their roles and accountability. In our company, we don't believe security is kind of like someone's job. Like my title happens to be cybersecurity, but it is part of everyone's role. And only together can we combat the threat. Next page. So where should you invest? At a high level, it's really about people, process, and technology. And it's hard to kind of give specific advice because not one size fits all, but look at your company, have a hard look at your company. If you need someone else to give you a third-party opinion of the cybersecurity state of your institution, you should do that. And from those gaps and from those lessons, try to focus on what makes a lot of investment. You don't need to spend a lot of money, quite actually. Capital or non-interest expenses related to cybersecurity investment can be offset just by resources and just hard work. A lot of the basic fundamentals of cybersecurity really is around processes, awareness, and education, and people aspect. Technology is a very expensive proposition. Next page. How we can help. So working with Scotiabank when it comes to fraud or cybersecurity actually engages a few different people within our organization. We believe in an ecosystem approach to defending and combat what we call financial crime. Cybersecurity being just one part of financial crime, anti-money laundering and fraud are also very significant. So when we detect fraud or when a customer reaches out to us saying, hey, I need help, I think I've been hacked, there's a bunch of people that get involved, such as the fraud management department, corporate banking, corporate security, money transfer operations, our legal department, business services, enterprise security, as well as global transaction banking. We have flown lawyers to places like Czechoslovakia the day before Christmas, because in Czechoslovakia, in order to stop or freeze a payment, you actually have to produce a case to the courts there. So we had to do just that. We've worked with institutions all over the world in trying to recover funds. One of the big advantages of working with Scotiabank is the fact that we do have a massive network of peers across the entire world that we've built up experience over time. And because of that network, we're able to reach out and work with those beneficiary banks and try to stop and recover funds. And we have a really good success rate at that because our customers that we work with reach out to us early as possible. Time is definitely the biggest factor when it comes to funds recovery. Next page. As I mentioned before, information sharing across the industry. So these are some of the regulators that we deal with on a very frequent basis, some of our mentorships, some of our threat intelligence sources, and some of our public sources. And our Security Operations Center gets all this information and we work with it on a daily basis and we contribute back. So when we see bad people trying to knock on our doors, we share that information with other institutions. We're seeing a lot more government and institutional activity in this. For instance, in the Caribbean islands, I have to call out the Dominican Republic, which is doing a fantastic job in making and enforcing all companies to send in real time cybersecurity attack data. So they have a great comprehensive view of all the bad things that are happening in the Dominican Republic at any one time. It's actually really impressive. Next page. So what do we share? We share indicators of compromise. So these are IP addresses, artifacts of a technical nature, tactics, techniques, and procedures. For instance, we'll get a ransomware email saying, hey, if you don't give us X million dollars, we're going to DDoS your company. That email, where it came from and who wrote it and the speech in that email, we share. And also specific details about certain situations and products that we don't disclose. Next page, to the public. This is our content center for Scotiabank, and actually Stephen Thompson on the line had a great hand in this, so I'm going to let him take over.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. We've been putting a lot of effort into building information on our webpage that's going to be made available. So a lot of that is tips on how to stay protected, safe computing practices. There's downloads on there that you can download for your organization. And we're making big strides in this for next year as well. We're looking to build, it's going to be a business center. So how to keep your business protected. And that's going to be a big focus of ours for next year, to develop content for that, to help all of you sort of take a look. How do you do an assessment on your business to make sure it is secure, and what steps you need to take to make sure everything is secure? This will give recommendations for policies and also different threats that your staff might face. So I think next page is questions. There we go.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, and thank you, Steve. Lots of great sound bites, and that we all need to take into consideration as we experience digital evolution taking place during this pandemic in particular. And we hope that our audience feels confident about your advice and our advice and expertise. as we all continue to adjust to this very, very unique time. More importantly, we hope you feel inspired to take action. So there are some questions coming in from the chat, but before we get to those, we'd like to address the questions that were submitted by email. And the first one for Rob or Steve, whichever one of you feels more comfortable answering. Question: what are the top 3 cybersecurity threats that businesses typically face?
Sure, I'll take that one. So the top threat would be, I guess, being resilient to commodity type of attacks. So making sure you have strong technical controls such as antivirus, you're patching your systems. If you have computers that are connected to the internet that your customers interface with, making sure they're devoid of security risk. Basically what I'm saying is a cyber attack and a breach. The second most pressing matter is data loss prevention, or ensuring where your critical information is, your sensitive information is, and protecting that information and ensuring that information doesn't fall into the wrong hands through whatever means. And the third, I guess, most critical type of pressing matter would be awareness and education around your employees. And social engineering attacks are on the rise and continue to be very pervasive for the sole reason that they're not technical. And ensuring that your employees aren't susceptible to common scams, that they can't be tricked easily, I think is definitely probably the third and most important pillar.
And now for our next question, either for Rob or Steve again. With competing priorities for my business, when considering options for cybersecurity, should I invest my dollars in process, people, or technology systems?
So I think Rob sort of alluded to this too, is each business is going to be a little bit different based on what they do. You really need to take a look at, what your major assets are. What do you consider your major assets? Is it your people? If so, then you need to start looking at controls that help protect your people. Like Rob said, I mean, a lot of the processes and protection against people are really generated through awareness campaigns. That's really just hard work and resources that are probably already on your team that can support that. The big investment dollar-wise is probably going to be in technology, but again, that needs to be commensurate with the business and what you're trying to protect. You don't want to bring in $1 million security component that's only going to protect an asset that's worth $10,000. So you need to sort of do a real risk assessment on the value of your assets and what's worth protecting.
Okay, and before we get to the chat, Damien, this one is for you. Locally, Scotiabank, Trinidad and Tobago. So since the COVID-19 lockdown, what challenges did you face with large numbers of employees needing to work from home? And what measures did you put in place to ensure business continuity?
Thanks, Tisha. I think there are a couple of things there. First thing is the context. The context is we've moved over 60% of our employees in 2 weeks home. And a lot of our customers have kind of told us the same thing, that they've had to pivot very quickly and bring a large number of people home. So first thing would be system capacity. So we increase bandwidth to ensure all the users that are home have maximum uptime. Now, since that time, we've actually gone to 80%. Just to give you a sense, that's nearly 1,300 users all working from home, all dealing with various processes. And I think to ensure that uptime and productivity is a key part of it. Now, of course, the other challenge that we had to deal with is around customer confidentiality and data privacy, to ensure that our customers' information continue to be safe. Because, there's nothing that we take more seriously than our customers' information security. So we've had to make sure, and I mean, obviously Rob and Steve and that entire team continue to make sure that we protect that information. For our teams here on the ground, we ensure that there are logical access controls. And that's just a fancy way of basically saying that the persons who are supposed to access customer information or particular customer data, they do have access. And then we've set up monitoring systems to ensure that even those who don't have access don't try to access customers' information. And I think the third challenge would have been around processes in terms of getting you, our customers, online. Like we've moved very aggressively to, have people use our cash management system. And, by all accounts so far, our customers have really taken to the system. They've taken to the new normal. And they've really been willing to listen to some of the sound bites we've heard today around not just getting online, not just using online, but making sure that risks are mitigated and any emerging trends are also identified and they can pivot and mitigate against. So I think those are the things that we have seen, and these are the ways that we have responded. And I think so far it's while the environment continues to be dynamic, I think it continues to be a good story for us here locally.
Okay, thank you so much, Damian. And back to Rob and Steve. This year, globally, we have reached a record high in cyber attacks. What has Scotiabank done to strengthen the security of the CMS platform?
A number of different things. So we're continuously securing the CMS platform. It's more of a journey, not a destination. Controls that we constantly are putting in are DDoS protection controls, understanding the latest attacks against websites that happen across the world. So I'll give you an example. The latest significant kind of unique attack happened to a bank in Dubai a few weeks ago. We already have that information within our system. We're continually looking at things like multi-factor authentication and technologies that go beyond the computer. One of the things that we're in proof of concept mode right now in some of our IT assets is what we call customer personification. I'll give you one example of what this is. It's when you lose your mouse cursor on your computer, are you first of all left-handed or right-handed? Do you squiggle it this way or do you go like this? Like, how do you bring that mouse cursor back? That's one of roughly 500 different ways you can determine who's behind the computer, such as do you click and type fastly or do you type slow? Do you use tab on your computer a lot? How do you interact with our websites? And what we try to do is capture that information and confirm the person behind the computer is really the person behind the computer. It sounds really great, but people's banking experiences are also different. So for instance, when you're doing your banking on Monday morning, it may be a little bit different way of how you interact with the computer than if you perhaps were a little bit tipsy on Saturday night. So that could trick the computers and make it really difficult for us to ascertain who's behind the computer. And that's just one of many examples of what we're doing with CMS.
All right, thanks so much, Rob. And aside from investing a significant portion of my budget into technology and systems, you mentioned employee awareness as a major focus. What does that look like, and how much time, how much funding should be spent on this?
No, that's a great question. When you ask any cybersecurity professional, they're going to tell you the same thing. Your weakest link in cybersecurity are your people. That's where you need to put a lot of focus. And really that's driven by policies internally, but it really needs to be driven from the top down. So from the CEO and senior management, you need to take that tone. You need to bake security into everything. And at the end of the day, when you think about the difference between the terms responsibility and accountability, I mean, ultimately your cybersecurity team or IT professionals are responsible for cybersecurity, but as the CEO and senior leaders, you are ultimately accountable for anything that goes wrong. There's legislation that's going on right now all over the place, and some of the penalties for that are actual. The CEO of an organization can be arrested if a cybersecurity event occurs that they knew was going to happen. So now you're becoming personally liable. So really, you need to the call to action should be as a senior leader. We need to take this seriously, and it needs to come from senior management and really instill cybersecurity into everything you do. Build those policies. Test your people, run phishing campaigns against them, conduct annual training, make sure that annual training is up to date. These are all very, very important steps to help prevent any types of attacks, specifically phishing and malware. So,
all right, thank you, Steve. And we've just got about 10 minutes left. We're not seeing any additional questions in the chat, so I'll just ask Damian to wrap things up. Damian, what are your closing thoughts?
Sure. Thanks, Disha. I think like this morning, it's been a good journey and kind of examination of just, again, not just what's happening, but all the options that are available to our customers. Like, using online banking and using digital processes in business is something that everyone has been focusing on. Everybody has been advancing that digital agenda. And I think finding risk mitigation tools such as the ones that Rob and Steve have so graciously shared this morning are going to just become a way of life. Using the system, using digital processes are just going to become a way of life. And I do think that we are here to help. Scotia is here to help. I mean, there's great information. There are great partners such as Rob and Steve, subject matter experts, and we have an entire team that's dedicated to doing this. We've made significant investments in ensuring that not only you guys are safe, but there's value to be had in using our system and in dealing with us from a day-to-day basis. So, as you continue to use the platforms, as you continue to, look at your own enterprise security, Scotiabank remains a partner to be able to, provide advice, to be able to tap you into our subject matter experts, or to show you how to integrate not just digital processes, but also the system into your day-to-day business, because this is just the new normal that we have today. So those are the thoughts that I would like to leave you guys with here today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Damian, and thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for your time. That's it for today. And within the next couple of days, we'll email you with the link to the video from the meeting. And of course, please share any further questions via email. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.